year in the best current operational practices track. Just by show of hands, how many of you this is your first time in a BCOP track? Okay, good. About 3/4 of you. Well, fantastic. So a little bit about what BCOP is about. We recognized certainly over the course of years in lots of different operational forums that people give presentations or you can search the web for things, and as soon as you get information, that information becomes effectively stale, right? These are things that continue to change and evolve, and our practices get better over time. There's no real place to get information vetted. So if you, for example, go Google for how do I whatever, what's the best way to do X? You don't generally get an understanding of the sources or how it's been vetted by subject matter experts or if it's still currently in use as a best current operational practice. So a few years ago, we decided to try and get the communities together and actually have a process by which we can document best current operational practices, get them written by subject matter experts, and get them vetted by the community. The idea behind BCLPs is to keep them current, so they're all living documents. Anybody in the community can participate, either as a subject matter expert or someone who just wants to know something, so you can appeal for information on a best current operational practice, or you can participate as an author, or even just shepherd a process to try and help put the right people together and help get things documented well. So this has grown quite a bit over the years. There's now BCOP tracks all over the world, and we've been starting to work on some global coordination, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So what this is going to be today is we're going to go over what's currently being worked on, and each of the respective shepherds are going to come up and talk about where they're at, where they need help, and how you can participate, where you can read information on the topic, et cetera. Here at NANOG, we have a BCOP committee. So this is an ad hoc committee that we started a year and a half ago, something like that. We had been doing these as small groups in a track, but we became an official ad hoc committee as of about a year and a half ago. So Chris Grundman and I chair the group. I co-chair the group, and then we have some members of the committee that actively participate in helping reach out to the community, help the authors and subject matter experts, help the process of getting things vetted and eventually become ratified. This is open to anybody, as I said, so you're, of course, encouraged to participate in the process and encouraged to help get best current operational practices documented for yourself, for the community, for people that you want to be able to hand references to say, here's how this is done best. It's great for, even internally when you say, this is how the world does something and this is how we do it, and here's a reference and here's why we should follow this process, or something you can hand to your customers, et cetera. So on today's track agenda, we have 5 BCOPs that are in progress. One is on DDoS attacks. One is on eBGP configs. We have a public peering exchange, Ethernet OAM, an anti-spoof best current operational practices document centered around the concept of how to deploy BCP 38, and then an update for what's going on with BCOPs around the world, as well as to go over the current appeals, looking for people to help fill in some gaps, and an open mic. So with that, I'm going to start with Yardiel to give an update on the DDoS attacks. And by the way, feel free to get up and come to the mic at any time. This is supposed to be an open dialogue. All right, Yardiel.
Taller, man.
Sorry.
Anyway, my name is Yardiel Fuentes, NetGeeks. We started the DDoS attack. Where are the slides here? Okay, there you go. Here? Yep. All right. I'm shepherding this BCOP with some of the SMEs there. They're kind of like different people from different service providers. And I put another person actually on the contributions. He's been like wanting to help us, but he was pretty busy actually fighting DDoS attacks and things like that, and he couldn't contribute. So so I decided to put his name because he still wants to contribute, and the idea was this is a living document, so anything that you can provide to the community so we can all grow and really learn, that was the idea. So I wanted to give him credit for at least trying to help us on that one. Oops. What do we start? What is the purpose of this? It's really to share practices which are performed in proven environments on what to do before actually you get attacked, during the attack, and after the attack. So we decided to actually do it in a methodical way from grassroots, actually just what do people do when they get attacked? We hear so much, theories, or can you buy this equipment, call it hardware networks, or you can buy this solid service from Akamai, or whatever you do, but you don't have control. You feel like you don't have control, and it's always the answer is buy something, right? So the idea is here, well, let's just try to break it down into, these components on a timeline. What is a good practice to do before you actually get attacked? So we came out with some sets of what to do there, what to do during the attack, and the most controversial part probably what to do after. You feel like, okay, I was a victim, I gotta victimize somebody, or I gotta tell somebody, let me call the police, type of thing. Let's see. Check out the draft that we have currently. That's where all the BCOPs are there, and the DDoS BCOP is there as well. Yeah, okay. For those of you who cannot read it, it's bcop.nanog.org. I guess the red is not very good. But go to that website, bcop.nanog.org, and you'll find it there. It's under drafts, okay? What do we need that? I think pretty much we all know why. DDoS attacks are increasingly getting more and more intense, bigger. Today I just heard that the biggest one was around 100 gig. I thought the biggest one was really around, most of them are around 20 gigs and it only lasts like 10 minutes, 5 minutes. But they're getting way bigger than that. 400 gigs. Well, there you go. Who gets another one? 500 gigs. Anyway, yeah, it's going big. So the idea is, how do you deal with that? There are some of the cloud providers. They're probably the biggest victims, and they're the ones who can contribute the most. So if any of you know numbers that can help us, that would really contribute to this BCOP, that'll be great. But the idea, again, I want to emphasize the bullet number 2 there, is really practical, something that we're all sharing on how we have done it. Whether we messed it up, that's fine. Tell us about it, because we want to hear about the mistakes so others don't make the same thing. So it's not about to get it only right, but also trying to see why it didn't work, right? Kind of like a collection of post-mortems. That's what we want to do. What to do? So let me just give you a quick outline. I've made some points here, but give you a quick outline on how we divided this on the timeline. So this is some of the things that you want to do prior that we came up with. Definitely firewall filters and ACLs. They're your best friends. You'll be surprised the intensity of most of those DDoS attacks are still very simple. TCP-based, UDP-based, that type of thing, like intense. So it's just showing you how bad you're doing your ACLs, probably in V6, right? So always pay attention to your open recursion for internal DNS. Mitigate, identify and mitigate most of the open relays. Consider DDoS mitigation subscription services. Obviously, we want to be vendor agnostic. We don't want to recommend buy this or do that. But definitely, there are some of those guys have products. Even some of the ISPs out there, they made all this DDoS attack a whole service product for them. Talk about cable and wireless. British Telecom. All those guys have this as a service. I forgot to mention the big ones: BCP 38, BCP 84. And obviously RFC 2827. So all we'll know about that. I kind of say that kind of falls within the firewall filters, 2827 RFCs, and BCP 84 is probably also on the multi-homing firewall filtering area. So, but just to throw the numbers that we all know and love. What to do during the attack? Well, you basically just collect an info at that point, I guess. The idea is they last they're very fast. They're getting even faster now. So the idea is to be able to collect enough info at this point that you can actually identify what the heck happened here, right? So you'll be able to correct it. Somehow you'll be able to do like, oh, my service subscriber that I'm, paying some money to, that they can actually help me out with this. They'll also help you collect information. So hopefully you'll correct and fine-tune your filters and all the different mitigation services that you have to deal with this. What else do we have here? Let's see. And what to do after the attack. Some of the things that we obviously say, just go and look at your firewall filters and ACLs. You may want to, you'll probably have most of the answers. If you don't, then probably try to identify what was what was attacked actually. That will be very useful, obviously. And some of the controversial points, you probably, if you guys are in the NANOG emailing list, you'll see some of the most controversial pieces, right? Who should I call? What should I tell? The FBI guys collect information in some sites. There's a Denver office that actually collects all this info. Some of our SMEs also mentioned IC3. They're interested in that info. It doesn't mean that they're going to do anything about it. They just want to probably collect it. But that's something that that should be done as well. And obviously, if you can share it with the community, that definitely will help a lot of us and will stop some of the bad guys on the messing our work, right? Some of the content that I think we're still missing in the BCOP, and we want to do it. So we're looking for participation from all of you guys. Definitely we want to be, what are the least effective or not effective methods that you guys have used or that we've used that you think that, try to stop, hey, that's a dead end, don't go down that path, that's not good. I heard a couple of ones. They were very much, I guess you would call it, equipment vendor specific, like we would call them bugs, right? But if you have any that will be worth collecting in the BCOP, that'll be great. And if you found any legal or law enforcement agencies, I think there was even an email thread going on a few days ago talking about some guy was already angry. Oh, how can we stop these guys so they don't get, they don't keep doing the spamming? So, but nobody answered. Basically, the answer, the result of the email thread is nothing. What else do we have? And there was another suggestion about doing that on the BCOP, start educating people a bit about how the DDoS are evolving, how they're growing, how they're getting to the 400 gig that somebody mentioned down there, how being able to do that. That's a real persistent DDoS there, that it's amazing. So any comments that you guys have are welcome. We've been working, I should just jump in here. If you're interested in DDoS or DOS attacks, we're not talking about statistics. We're talking about what to do and how you actually stop it so you can help the community. That's really the goal here. Do you have any real-world experience with DDoS attacks? Have you been a victim? Awesome. So you can help us out to see how you were attacked, how we can actually improve the BCOP here. If you're interested in helping us. So please get involved. The one thing that we like to do with the team that we have with the SMEs that we've been doing is all through email. So we don't need your real time. You can do it whenever you have time. You send the email to the group, and we kind of grow from there. And the discussion might start corrections or documents, and we start working from there. The idea is not to intrude into your timing. Okay. And contribute as little as you can. That's fine too. And the more voices that you have, the better. I think there was a cloud provider, Brian, DigitalOcean, who's being attacked a lot, and he's going to help us out too. So we're planning to start finalizing this now, but we're really looking forward to his input into the BCOP. So hopefully helping us. Questions, comments on this BCOP? All right.
Yeah, and for all of you with the laptops or whatever, you're more than welcome to pull up the site. All of these drafts are online at bcop.nanog.org. There's apparently a logo off the main NANOG page you can click on as well. Now we're going to have Bill Armstrong on EBGP BCOP.
Hey, y'all. So we've got the BGP configuration BCOP. And pretty much the goal of this BCOP is to just document BGP, like eBGP peering. We all do it. We all know people who've done it. And we all did it for the first time at some point. Can you not hear me? Is that better? Okay. We all did BGP at some point for the first time. And I would bet probably everyone in this room had a scenario where things went pear-shaped at some point because of something that a quick search on Google now would reveal, like, oh yeah, max prefix. That's a good one. So really, you know, I kind of hit this here. The driver behind this is we were going through to identifying different things for you know, different appeals to actually start like getting these things together. There was a thread in there that really highlighted this exact scenario. That, like, you know, it was a multi-day thread. The guy's trying to turn up a new session. It's not happening, and really it ended up coming down to a max prefix. Like, you know, he didn't have it set, or he didn't have it wide enough, and his session would come up and drop. Come up and drop, and you know, no one can figure it out. Is it this? Is it that? And it, max prefix. Very easy, obvious stuff. But if you don't know it's there, it's difficult. So we started this BCOP, and initially, you know, we used to have when we did our first presentation back in, where was it, Arizona. This was a bit more truncated, but we've been working on it. So we've got some data in there. We've got a handful of folks who've been contributing, and we try to stay vendor agnostic as much as possible. When we get into the path selection, we figured it's worth highlighting that, you know, Juniper and Cisco do have a couple different knobs that matter. And that's some of the stuff that I'd be interested in hearing from folks is how deep do we want to go into that? You know, I've never messed with Huawei's gear or ALU or anyone like that. And I wasn't sure if this was something that we really want to drill into and say, oh, well, but these guys, when you turn this one on, because I mean, ultimately, how many different devices speak BGP and how crazy do we want to go with that? So, I mean, you could go and grab the RFCs, you know, kind of here's how it works. Hit the easy ones, and that might do it. But Juniper, Cisco, big names, they may not be bad ones to cover off the bat there.
Well, is this going to become like an educational series for the novice? I would think it would have to be at some point at least broken out to some degree. Sorry for breaking it.
Oh no, that's the point of this session. No, so I don't know. Did everyone hear the question? Loosely. So I guess Mike's question was, is this going to be, is the function of this thing to really hit the bases so that way anytime Dick and Harry can show up and find this kind of canonical document that says this is what the world does when they consider turning up a peering session? And if so, should we cover all the bases? And I don't know. I mean, that's really, I think that's up to, you know, the authors of this thing, and those authors are probably everyone in this room plus a bunch of folks on the list. And I think we need to see, you know, that's a scope question. How deep do we want to go? How wide, et cetera? Personal opinion, Juniper and Cisco, safest bet. Most folks emulated one or the other, or split the difference, you know, like weight, for example, in Cisco. Yeah, it's probably worth knowing, particularly, you know, if someone's passing it, but I mean, you know, I don't know. That's why it's out there. So we've gone through, we've identified a handful of things. We definitely go into iBGP because folks may very well be familiar with iBGP. And there's a shock to the system when you go and find out that there's different things that matter when you get into the eBGP scenario, or vice versa. So it's good to make sure that we've got that kind of like the basic tiebreakers, what changes between the two. But the focus of this thing really is eBGP configuration and kind of basic peering. So we're not drilling into, you know, IXP specific stuff or only transit. It's really, these are the things. So whether and we've kind of abstracted the term transit to not just be a transit, like if you're a service provider and purchasing transit from a tier 1, it's really getting a zeros route or greater from someone else to get you to the next place. That's how it's defined, and that's how we drill in from there. And so we've gone in, and as we get deeper into this thing and we get into the policy considerations, this is really where I think we need more feedback from the community. Because these things, everyone knows kind of like the general like bogon things that you probably ought to filter, where to maybe get some of this data from, what communities may be used by different providers, things like that. But I think everyone's probably got a different spin on how you want to handle these things. And it'd be really nice to get some feedback from everyone to see what we can boil down and distill into like, this is for sure the definitive, ideal type of filtering we want to drop on the edge there. And then we also, one of the things, and this is also covered in one of Chris's documents there, that's currently a draft. I think the IPv6 peering one has some of this data, but it's really kind of the stewardship stuff. So the IRR configurations, things like that, making sure you're, updating your data, getting RPSL going, all that. So that's fairly vanilla, and I think we've got that one covered. But it'd be good to see if there's anything that we've missed. And then the biggest one that we really need more info on, which is right down here at the very, very bottom, testing and validation. So we've got some stuff in there. I've gone through and grabbed a handful of scenarios. It's definitely not complete. And I'd be interested to see what folks use as a standard basis, like when I turn on BGP, these are the things that I validate once it's up. And then also we've got a handful of troubleshooting steps within there. Typical scenarios that happen, BGP establishment problems, max prefix was one of the things I highlighted there. eBGP multi-hop, validation, how many TTL is too many TTL, things like that, checking that stuff out. L2, always validate that you have IP reach before you try to turn up a peer. It can be really frustrating otherwise, that kind of stuff. So here's some of the participants right now. I think I've only seen Nina around today, but so everyone's kind of throwing some stuff in. Similar to Yardiel there, Karsten Tominen threw his name out there. I think he threw a couple things at us early on, but he did his diligence. He got his word out there, so we got our thing going.
There's one thing that I don't see covered in this BCOP at all.
Yes.
Even if it should just be covered in negative fashion, confederation.
That's disgusting.
Yes, I've run into it 4 times in the last 6 months.
Well, all right, cool.
And like, even if the reference was just, confederation, if you think you need this, you're wrong.
Okay. Well, I mean, that may not be a bad one to actually hit maybe under.
Because that is, like, if that's the best,
Yeah, and that's kind of that in-between land between the I and E thing where like, okay. That may not be a bad one to throw in there to at least like identify what it is and the how come. Yes.
we need some best practices document to show the client saying, no, don't do it.
Yeah, that's yucky.
Is the scope for these trying to get ISPs working together for their operational practice, or for them to hand to customers and say, play this way or else?
I think it's more, the answer is yes. I think it's really, these practices are things that everyone ought to probably do. Some of the stuff is very specific to the provider space, but some of it's definitely specific to the consumer, the CE side of the house. Because the problems are the same. I mean, just because I do it on gigantic routers and have to worry about multiple peers and transits plus customers, doesn't mean that the customers don't have to deal with multiple peering partners and additional external peers. It's the same problem. It's just and so when you get into some of the things like the filtering at the edge and stuff like that, you ought to have a bogon filter in. You can't trust your provider. You should be able to, but it could be a dude like me running that thing. You could be in a jam. So making sure that you've got that filtering in, like, I don't want to accept 164 from you, ISP. That's marked as special. So I think that the goal is really to make sure we've covered the bases.
And the reason for my asking those is, with his question of confederations, you can see the scope going well beyond the small type
Right.
crammed onto one page here if you go too far with that. Because I would look at confederations and say, screw it, if they piss me off, I'll just do an AS override.
Right. Which, and that is one of those things that even putting the even putting the IBGP stuff in there, it was kind of a question because we don't want to go down that rabbit hole because we really care about eBGP specifically. But it may not be a bad thing to at least say this is what it is, and this is why we're not talking about it. And maybe, I don't know if there's some sort of cautionary tale we could attach to it, but that may be something we can talk about, in the list there to figure out how we want to tackle that problem. Those are the folks. So right now we've got a draft posted. There's a couple sections that probably need, oh yes, Charlie.
Yes, quick question. He said, I don't need to take each people inside. He's doing
You know, I don't know if we cover, I'm trying to think if we've got a section in there that actually, I mean, that's kind of basic interop stuff to make sure that like the external peer can support, particularly if you're the guy running it. But, you know, it may not be a bad thing to have in there. I'll have to look back through the doc and see if we've got it in there.
Did you discuss splitting solid separation? Because there's a pretty big, you know, on the IBGP and electronic network, it doesn't matter if it's match up and special practices or
Right.
world, as long as my EBGP matches up.
Right. Yeah, so the goal really is, it's really eBGP. And we've got IE in there simply to kind of like just point out what it is. But yeah, eBGP is really the thing because that's the one where you have to play nice with people, or hope that someone else is playing nice with you. But you know, trust but verify kind of stuff. That's where the filtering and all that stuff starts coming in. So current status, draft is posted. There may be some rough patches grammatically, things like that. I'm even if you're not a BGP person, but you really like reading broken English and difficult documents, I'd appreciate the support for, you know, for just basic kind of editing, you know, detecting nits, putting commas in places, things like that. That's helpful because ultimately, you know, these documents need to be able to stand on their own. And if you are interested in BGP just generally, and you do it all the time, that's really helpful too, because you probably have, you know, copy and paste templates, things that you've done, whatever it is you've done over your entire career. There's probably some piece in there, particularly when you get into the testing and validation, that will help get this document to where we need it to be. Also, Aaron's going to get deeper into this, or maybe Chris is. I don't know who's going to talk about it, but there's a handful of different NOGs out there that are working towards a common document. You know, we're all doing a similar thing. Everyone kind of sees like peering is kind of a thing that we have to do to make the internet work, so maybe we should write something down. And now that's been said, not only in English, but in Japanese, Polish, and a couple other different languages. And also, there was an IETF effort a couple years back to create a BCP that kind of died on the vine. But you know, we've talked to those guys, and they're actually interested in participating in this thing as well. So that doesn't mean we're definitely going IETF direction with it, but we definitely have a handful of guys who've thought about this problem previously, and we're going to start folding some of their documentation into this thing here shortly, I think, potentially. So, you know, join us. Like what Yardell says, I mean, it's pretty flexible. Handful of the guys wanted to have a sync-up call. We do that. It's not required. I mean, we just pretty much, you know, shoot emails back and forth. I've got a Google group going, so we can kind of do our stuff, collaborate, etc. And that's about all I got. Any questions? Well, wonderful. Thank you all.
All right, now I have Sean come up to talk about public peering exchange participants, BCOP.
Hello, my name is Shang Xiao. I'm a shipper for the Public Peering Exchange participant BCOP. This is primarily an update of an existing rectified BCOP. Just feel like there are some focus that we want to refocus on more on participant side, and there are a couple of items we want to add to the BCOP. So the primary difference between a public peering exchange and the typical transit provider relationship would have is most likely it's a large layer 2 environment, and there are policies and procedures that you would not allow, or IXP would not allow you to do certain things. For example, the handling of the prefixes covering the exchange. So those are kind of the two main focus of this BCOP. One of the big questions is how do we handle the routes, the prefixes, right? How do we advertise it? Different approaches has different trade-offs, and how do we describe the trade-off concisely and make recommendation of what's the best things to do when you are in certain situation. And obviously there's a lot of common practices that you borrow from the general eBGP configuration side, so there will be cross-references and sharing of contents there. So here's where I really need help. So we have a document, primarily from before. There are some bullet items that we have already updated, but I really need SMEs to come in and help. I would love to chat with you if you do public peering. raise your hand if you do public peering or managing the operation of that. Yeah, there's a lot of people here. I really love to talk to you guys and see what we can do to make this better, because for me, managing a public peering relationship and a transit provider relationship are very different, right? A transit provider, if they screwed up, I can yell at them. Public peering, not so much. But at the same time, we're also dealing with very, very different group of people who operate at different scale, operate at different kind of sense of urgency, right? So we don't want things to get disrupted in our production environment just because none of us are following the best practices. So here are some of the outlines that we kind of added into the existing one, primarily focusing on how we deal with the IXP policy. We don't want to accept IXP policy, IXP prefixes in general from other places, because that's not a good thing to do. And in terms of resiliency, BGP resiliency, in terms of the BGP timer and BFD, the best practice of how to configure that, how to work with your peer on that. And finally, is traffic engineering and then management of peering in multiple locations. I've seen a couple of weird things, depends on who you peer with. So those are, I think, are unique in the public peering exchange environment that you generally may not run into in a BGP typical, say, transit provider environment. Two of the primary area that I really want to focus on are focusing on the handling of the IXP prefixes. So we can make a recommendation there. At the same time, find a good way to integrate with the typical, more general BGP configuration. Next step, really want to find some SME to come in and help. I'm hoping we'll be able to do something quickly in the next month or so. We'll be able to reach a state where we can send it for candidate BCOP. So that's pretty much it. Any questions? Thanks.
All right, excellent. Next up is going to be Mark with the Ethernet OAM BCOP.
Hello, I'm Mark Hawkins, and I'm shepherding the Ethernet OAM BCOP. I'm also writing and SME. So we are aiming to provide insight into Ethernet OAM. We don't think it's very commonly deployed, or at least well understood. We'll try to capture the best current operational practices, as well as maybe some emerging practices, like maybe running LFM in your core. It doesn't necessarily have to be something you run in the last mile. Okay. The background is basically what I just said. We don't think it's well understood outside of the service provider community, and I think even within our community, I see lots of eyes glaze over when I bring this topic up. So participants are myself, Wojtek Kozak from Comcast, JF, who I can't remember the company he works for. He's a CTO somewhere, and myself. They're both not here today, so this is the current outline. It did kind of, I had wanted to break these out and make a bunch of individual BCOPs, but it kind of didn't work out that way. A lot of the general stuff kind of got weeded in with the other topics, so I'm keeping it as one document for now. But we cover the, kind of like what Mike was talking about, we do kind of try to educate and bring people up to the level where they can understand why something is a best current operational practice. So we go through LFM, or link level OAM, service layer, and did not even attempt ERPS because I don't know anything about it and no one has volunteered to be a SME. So if you're an ERPS guy, come talk to me. So most of this stuff is complete. The orientation, the link level, I don't think will be changing too much. Service layer, there's just so much to cover with the service layer. I'm not sure when to call it done. We did a lot of the fault management. The performance management is definitely lacking. We only have a few of the PDU types covered. So if you have experience with the performance management and some of the more exotic PDUs, that would be great to hear from you also. So before ratification, I want to at least get to 80% with the service layer, and ERPS again, I'll be needing a SME for that. So continue SME recruitment, we're doing that right now, right? compile feedback received, and by the way, I would appreciate all feedback, commas, grammar. I'm not a writer, so that would really help. Complete service layer EOEM, and then I will wikitize the document. So get involved. It's not going to make your career being involved here, but it will really help me out. So that would be nice. Any questions? Okay. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to talk a little bit about another BCOP that I'm not actually actively working on right now. It's in progress. It's the draft. This is one that the draft hasn't been posted yet because it's a security-related topic. There's kind of a fairly decent group of security experts working on it in closed room first to make sure that it isn't completely crazy, and then it's going to be dropped on the wider audience probably within the next few weeks or so. I know there's some reviews going on. It's being tossed around for reviews amongst kind of the security community right now. And this is basically something that's taking BCP 38 and doing a couple of things. One, really looking at the practical aspects of how do people actually do this on their networks. The folks who have deployed anti-spoofing filters on their actual networks, how are they actually doing it? Not just what does it say are the options in BCP 38. But again, practically, how are people actually doing this? How has it worked? How has it not worked? And also looking at a little bit wider scope. It's not just ISPs, which BCP 38 is basically targeted strictly at ISPs. And this BCOP is going to look at both ISPs, but also enterprises and IXPs, and kind of the gamut of how do you do anti-spoofing protections on your network, regardless of what kind of network it is, right? And again, this one is one that really excites me because, again, if going back to the DDoS, right? I mean, there's not much you can do once you're under a denial service attack or distributed denial service attack. But if everyone were stopping spoofed addresses, we'd see a huge reduction in spam and denial service attacks. I mean, it's really as simple as putting these filters in. So hopefully this gets some traction once we get it pushed out, and definitely keep a look for it. Right now, like I said, there's a rough draft completed. It's being vetted within the security community. Feel free to send an email, and again, on all of these, right? So all of the drafts except for this one are all posted on the wiki at bcop.nanog.org. You can also click through from the main website. Just click on the BCOP link. All the drafts are posted there, and we have a mailing list. I think it's just bcop@nanog.org. BCOP-support. It's on the website. Yeah. So it's just BCOP right, at nanog.org, I think. But it's definitely on the website. If you go to bcop.nanog.org, the email address is right there. And it's bcop.nanog.org, which makes sense. bcop@nanog.org, sorry. And if you shoot an email there about any of these topics or new topics, we're all monitoring that list, and then everyone who's on the list, obviously. I mean, the whole idea is for it to be a discussion forum there. So that's the in-progress BCOPs we have within the NANOG region. And I'm going to really quickly kind of go through a little bit about how this BCOP effort is expanding globally. There's a link at the top here, internetsociety.org/deploy360/about/BCOP. If you go to the Deploy 360 site at Internet Society, you'll be able to find this pretty easily. And there's a whole page that has current status, fairly current status on all of the efforts around the world. Just looking really quickly here. In Africa, there's a BCOP group that's been started. They are working within the AFNOG mailing list right now, and in kind of early phases. There's been a couple of birds of feather meetings at the last two AFNOG meetings. AFNOG meets once a year, so it's ongoing. 2 meetings actually means they've been meeting for 2 years, so it's fairly significant. They'll be meeting again, I believe, at the LACNIC meeting in Mauritius in November, and Douglas Yango is right now leading that effort, along with some support from the Internet Society, and that's all kind of rolling. There is one, well, we can do that. The Asia BCOP Task Force, there hasn't been a region-wide Asian BCOP effort started yet, but within JANOG, at the Japanese Network Operators Group, they've started to kind of convert one of their existing document streams into a BCOP track, where they're going to start publishing new documents. And one of the focuses there, the reason it's hyper-localized, is in Japan, they mostly speak Japanese, unlike a lot of other countries where a lot of engineering work gets done in English. In Japan, most of it gets done in Japanese still. And so having their own group for BCOPs, even if it's just translating out-of-region BCOPs into Japanese is really helpful for them. And then also NZNOG, the New Zealand NOG, is starting an effort locally as well. And we're hoping to get a whole region effort started. Some of the reasons I go to Asia a lot right now. Europe has, within RIPE, there's a BCOP task force which was created. It's co-chaired by Benno Overrider and Jan Zors, and they're on their way to creating documents. It's an official part of RIPE now as a task force. Because RIPE already has task force and working groups for a bunch of different topics, one of the main purposes of the BCOP task force is to identify documents that should be written, kind of hand those ideas off to the working group. So say the IPv6 working group or the DNS working group or whatever working group it falls under within RIPE. So kind of just almost a secretariat for these documents through the normal RIPE document process. In Latin America, another BCOP task force is underway there. Again, a few birds of feather meetings. I believe they have a mailing list set up, and Luis Balbino and Pedro Artores are involved, as well as a lot of the LACNIC and LACNOG folks that you may know if you ever travel down there. And again, that's one that's kind of just getting ramped up. They're right now working on their development process. So how do we put together documents in that region? And obviously North America, you're here, you've seen what we're up to right now. Going a little bit deeper, I'm not going to go too far into this, but one thing I do want to mention is that in Africa right now, there is actually an AFNOG BCOP document in progress, which is taking a local look at specific things with, I believe it's a IPv6 deployment specific to Africa kind of thing, because there's some strangeness there with some things that have been put together. So they're already developing a document. RIPE, here's some links to the RIPE stuff. They have a couple of documents in flight. One is a troubleshooting kind of checklist for IPv6 troubleshooting for help desks. So the idea is this is a document where you could hand it over to your first line customer support or second line or whoever's the ones who actually answers questions, and have it be a base template for where to start, right? And then of course your network, you're gonna have your own little things and tips and tricks to try. But the basic list of if IPv6 isn't working at somebody's house or somebody's business, what are the things they should check to go through to figure out why. LACNOG BCOP, I think I talked about almost all of this. Again, the main thing they're working on right now is the development process, which is just how do they actually write documents, vet them, publish them, go back again to the life cycle. Again, Asia we're kind of waiting on. We've been talking about this in forums all over the world. So this is just kind of a quick list of places where we've had conversations about BCOP efforts. Not all of them have started BCOP efforts yet, but this is something that's definitely spreading. I think everywhere I go to talk about it, people are really interested and really excited. And then the shortfalling is, not all of us have all the time in the world to just go write documents for free on the side. Luckily, quite a few people do. And at least if you can commit a little bit of time, it makes a huge difference. As you can see, when we get 5 or 6 people writing a document, everybody writes a paragraph or two, really, when it comes down to, or edits in some things, or adds some links, and it doesn't become a huge workload typically. Speaking of that, we have a page up that I'm gonna actually check out real quick here, maybe. There we go. So this is the list of appeals on the NANOG website. The way NANOG set up our development process is that, there we go. The process starts with an appeal. So anyone can ask a question, what is the best current operational practice for this? For example, traceroute, or route server filters at IXPs, right? Or login requirements per country. Not as relevant in the US, because in NANOG we only really have to deal with US and Canada, but in a lot of other places in the world, this is a huge problem if you're running a multinational ISP. The login requirements themselves are just hard to keep track of. So these are all appeals. These are questions that we think the community has asked that folks want an answer to. And we're not saying there's not an answer. We're saying that no one has written it down in this format. Some of these can be answered really quickly because somebody did write it down somewhere already, and all we really need to do is just link it together, pull it together. Some of them have been written down several times, and we just need to figure out the differences, right? Synthesize what's actually the best current operational practice versus the different versions for different areas of the world, or different companies, or whoever wrote the documents. And one thing I really want to point out here is, while we do have a committee that's chartered with pushing this effort forward in North America within the NANOG region and keeping everything moving. And right now, everyone you saw who presented a document in progress happens to be a member of the committee. That's not the way we expect this to go. That doesn't scale, right? 8 of us can't fill out and write all these documents within any kind of reasonable time frame. So we really want people who are excited about one of these topics or their own topic to step up. And there's several ways to do that. Let me switch back to the slides here. Cool. Which is, so one thing is just ask the appeal, right? Just come to the bcop@nanog.org mailing list and ask your question. Or if it's something you really, if something's already on that list, a new idea, whatever it is, you can volunteer to shepherd. And a shepherd doesn't necessarily have to write anything. The shepherd's job is to go find subject matter experts and be the whipping boy, right? Send emails, make phone calls, send text messages, find them in the halls at meetings, and make sure that the SMEs are actually contributing, and then maybe help edit it together. You can be a shepherd and a SME, right? Or you can be just a SME where you're adding content, maybe something you've already written, maybe you have internal documents you can cut and paste parts from. I mean, a lot of this isn't super hard, because again, the idea is we're writing down best current operational practices, so none of it should really be new. It should be stuff that, at least somebody knows. And with that, I'd like to roll it over to the open mic. Does anybody have any comments, questions, or ideas, thoughts? Yeah, please.
Find a lot of commonalities across the regions.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the question was, are we seeing lots of similarities between the regions? Because again, we probably don't want to see different BCOPs for Latin America versus North America. And yeah, I agree. This is the internet, and hopefully it works pretty much the same everywhere on the planet. Otherwise, we're doing something wrong, right? I mean, the whole idea was interoperability and a network of networks. So yeah, so there should be commonality. Right now, so if we roll back in history, right, the original idea was to have one BCOP effort globally, and that just didn't quite get off the ground. It's really hard to pull that off. And so we stepped back and let efforts kind of spur up regionally, which allows for working, right? So we have the same language, we have the same time zone, we're close to each other, we come to some same meetings, so this group finds it easy to work together. But I agree that the long-term question there is how does this all tie together at the top? We haven't gotten quite to that point yet. There are a number of us watching what's happening and making sure that there is coordination between the groups right now. Eventually, I think there's going to be some kind of I believe there needs to be some kind of official secretariat where we're vetting documents, probably a board or a council or something similar to the NRO, where representatives from each region can vet the documents and say, yes, we all agree this is fine, or that, that this is not fine, but best. Yeah. Please.
Hi. Chris Woodfield with Twitter. I noticed that a lot of the documents are maintained in the wiki format. Are they publicly editable? Can one just register for an account and make updates to the draft documents, or is that to be handled by administrators?
So you do have to get an account just for spam prevention right now, but really if you just email the list and say, hey, I want to contribute, you'll get an account.
Okay.
We just don't want it open completely because obviously wikis, when they're completely open, get messy pretty fast.
Okay.
Also, each document is kind of worked on by the group that's working on it. And so a lot of them are either using like a Google Doc or a Word doc they're emailing around, or something on GitHub, or Etherpad, or whatever it is. And the main thing is we just want to keep the wiki updated so that everyone can tell the status of the document. But a lot of the work may not even happen on the wiki. And when they're done, when they're published, they're all published in both the wiki format as well as like a PDF, so you can just download it, print it out, whatever you need to do. Anything else? Who's going to go check the site and volunteer to work on a document? Everyone? Right now. You have anything else? We're pretty early. All right. Well, thank you. If there's no other questions, I won't hold you here any longer than we have to. I think there's a social in about 30 minutes, so maybe a little splash of water on the face. Thanks, everyone.